When looking at the structure and departments in a pharmaceutical organization, it's pretty easy to understand since every area and department is spread out across the drug development process, wrapped with quality. So again, we look at the medical need. The medical need as it arises. We have the R&D team who basically push that to a competent authority to get different regulations approved. We'll get that approved and push that into manufacturing. So if you look at that process, the operations are all of those different areas from R&D all the way to production. And that's all wrapped in quality. Quality is infused across every single process, from the R&D process, submission to regulatory authorities, all the way to the manufacture and storage and distribution of that out to end customers. So quality wraps everything, and operations is across that entire vertical. Let's now look at the different roles though by department. So breaking the kind of whole function up into 5 different sections. We see R&D at the start, so that's pretty self-explanatory. R&D makes up a smaller part of the workforce typically of a pharmaceutical company, but I'll give you some more stats on that in a second. But then once you get past that process, we're into the production process, the production and manufacturing. So it starts with, let's say, upstream and downstream activities. So that might be synthesizing the drug, or perhaps trying to identify a certain protein and actually getting that out of different compounds, right? So that's the upstream and downstream activity within that. You also have the manufacturing, science, and technology behind that. So the systems and processes and technology and systems that are involved in actually delivering on that. And you'll of course have fill, finish, and packaging, which might be, for example, you have the actual compounds, but you need to turn them into tablet format and then package them for consumers. So that production manufacturing process is actually broken down into other subsections beneath that to actually deliver on an end product. Quality as a separate team is really big. So you have the overall quality team, a quality assurance being the part of quality that's more around how do we make sure that we have consistent quality going forward. So it's more around the design of processes and systems, whereas quality control is the checking to make sure that those the QA processes have led to the end result. So it's more the checking to make sure it works. Whereas validation, the validation part is looking and saying, do we have an actual strong process that we can scale to say this has been done? So kind of the checklist process that's driven there as part of that quality department. And of course, within quality, we also have regulatory affairs who deal with all the filings with the different competent authorities and regulatory authorities within the whole process of getting the drug to market, and obviously proving that you're doing things the right way as you go along. Operations is again quite extensive. You've got maintenance who actually have to maintain all the different machinery and systems involved there. So a lot of engineering and kind of manual labor tasks there. You've got HVAC or heating, ventilation, and air conditioning teams. Of course, in a massive controlled environment in a manufacturing plant, important to perhaps have temperature at a certain level, have the right ventilation going through. That will be part of sometimes the regulatory approval process, and quality trying to make sure that's all in place as well to deliver the drug or compound in the right environment. You have automation and control, which is around the systems and processes and technology to make all that work. And then the building services, the support services around actually logistics of getting all that done. Could be the canteens, it could be the people on reception, could be security, again within that operation environment. And then you've got all the other pieces that come into play, which in a lot of organizations make up the most amount of employees, but in a pharmaceutical companies, much smaller functions. Sales, supply chain, logistics, HR, warehousing, finance, all these different management overhead. And that's generally your structure of a pharmaceutical organization. As you'll see here, production and manufacturing make up half of the workforce in the actual full chain of getting the drug to market. Quality, which as I said is infused everywhere, make up about 30% of the workforce. Then you get down to things like operations, 10%, R&D only about 5%, and everything else is that remaining 5%. So, you know, if you look at where the jobs are and where the demand is, production and manufacturing very much the biggest need, and quality the second biggest need beyond that as well. So let's look at some trends that are happening within the industry as well. So not every big company that we looked at actually does the end-to-end process from start to finish there. A lot of organizations say, well, we're really good at developing drugs and getting them approved. But you know what? We're not interested in the other parts of it. And that is perhaps more the labor-intensive parts. Any organizations say, we do that fantastically well. That's what we'll specialize in. And you see a trend towards outsourcing. Where of course you got in-house expertise in certain areas like R&D, but you might outsource the rest of that to Countries like India, which is growing massively as an outsourced provider, not just in the end kind of manufacturing processes, which you'd expect from an outsourced kind of provider, but also in outsourcing R&D and clinical trials and that kind of process as well. So that's a huge, big growth area. Not just, as I said, the operational part, the manufacturing part, which is 50% of the workforce, to again, low-cost countries, lower-cost labor, but the R&D parts as well as going to different markets, perhaps higher value-added countries and particularly higher value-added skills going into that process. But when a company can specialize in really good R&D, then you see the big pharma companies using that. But you also have outsourcing to even areas like distribution. As I mentioned, quality is a really, really important piece across all the pharmaceutical organizations. So ISO-approved distribution partners could be really good in the mix. And if you're looking to hire perhaps people on the distribution side, you're looking for organizations that use global standards like ISO because they're more likely to be a good fit for those jobs. So lots of jargon and all that. I want to do a quick recap of some of the new phrases and acronyms we've been introduced to. So you've got MSAT, so Manufacturing Science and Technology is often that grouping. The acronym MSAT, MSAT, is the grouping of those different job roles and functions. QA being quality assurance and QC being the quality control. QA being processes, QC more being the checks on that. Regulatory affairs, obviously dealing with all the regulatory affairs in that overall manufacturing process and often in the regulatory affairs process preceding clinical trials as well. HVAC being heating, ventilation, air conditioning, big part of typical factory and manufacturing operation, and more highly skilled individuals to control air flows, temperatures, to get the right environment to manufacture that as well. But also acronyms like CMC, chemical manufacturing control, being important as well. And then our famous and most loved profession, HR, being human resources.